The secret history and dubious origins of the Keepers of Steeltown, as recalled by Jimmy Lloyd and dictated to an old Indian medicine man with mystical powers. There have been many inquiries as of late pertaining to the mysterious origins of the Keepers of Steeltown, so I figured I would elaborate on just how this supergroup came into being. It all began way back in the 3rd grade at Steeltown Elementary School on East Steel Street. I had just moved to Steeltown from a little village in Romania where my family had a blood transfusion business for generations. My dad got a new job in the mill in Steeltown, so we relocated. I barely spoke a word of English on the first day of school. The day I met Daniel Ghent. He was sitting next to me in Miss Sullivan's class. He was wearing a Pink Floyd T-shirt and I was wearing a Thin Lizzy T-shirt. He looked at me and without warning said, "I ain't never gonna sell out." And although I spoke no English, these were the only words I did know. I looked back at him and from then on, we just kinda knew we were kindred spirits. This is where it all started. A week later, I had fully mastered the English language and me and Daniel started hanging out on the reg. Though we weren't yet writing songs, we listened to a lot of music behind the 7-Eleven on North Steeltown Avenue. Mostly Pink Floyd and Thin Lizzy, though sometimes we listened to Zeppelin and Bowie. As time went on, we started a very successful cigarette selling business and used the proceeds to buy D batteries and cassette tapes of our favorite bands, mostly Pink Floyd and Thin Lizzy. One day these other ruffians from South Steeltown, I think their names were Gabe Watson and Tristan Hindy, they were real bad hombres from bad stock. Well, they tried to muscle in our cigarette selling action, so Daniel called his uncle who was in a 1%er motorcycle club, which shall remain nameless, and he paid a little visit to them. The next day, we not only had all our customers back, but a whole new client list to boot. Life was good. We were the best of friends. Time passed and we entered Steeltown Middle School over on Mountain Range Road. We had started writing songs by this time and we were thick as thieves. I usually did the lyrics and some of the music and Daniel would add other instruments to it and sometimes sing. We probably wrote a couple 100 songs in those days. Mostly about cigarettes and what we thought life was like on the other side of the mountain. We dreamed of being like Pink Floyd and Thin Lizzy. Daniel never really spoke much, but when he did, it was always something profound or insightful, and I came to understand over time that he had a direct hotline into the spirit realm. Like Commissioner Gordon did with that red phone under the glass thingy when he needed to call Batman. One day in the middle of 7th grade, at the end of an epic hang behind the 7-Eleven on North Steeltown Avenue, Daniel said to me, "Tomorrow, I'm gonna tell you what it's all about." We agreed to meet up at 4 p.m. the next day. I was so excited that I could hardly eat or sleep that night. The next day, I put on my favorite Thin Lizzy T-shirt, rode my Mongoose BMX bike down to the 7-Eleven, and I waited, and waited, and waited. Daniel never arrived. After an hour, I happened to notice a piece of paper under a rock behind a milk crate. I picked it up and realized it was a note from Daniel. It read, "Jimmy, if you want to know the truth about life, just ask a cop or poet. Everyone else is just speculating." And it was signed Daniel from Steeltown. And that was it. He never showed up, and I never saw him again. My friend was gone, and I was left with just memories and this cryptic note. Sometimes I'd go by myself up to Jesus Christ Hill and look out over the town and convince myself that he was riding back into town from the distance, but he never came back. The years passed and I'd hear tales that Daniel was in Alaska working in a cannery, or that he'd become a pirate in the South Seas, or that he was a brakeman on the Norfolk Southern Railroad. And I'd even heard that he'd moved to Argentina and was running a successful cigarette selling business. I didn't know what to believe, but I never forgot about him. Years and years later, after I too left Steeltown, I was all grown up, and now I was Jimmy Lloyd from New York City with a successful TV show on NBC called the Jimmy Lloyd Songwriter Showcase, known around town for my quick wit, my songwriting prowess, my panache for beautiful women and life in the fast lane. JimmyLloyd.com, at Jimmy Lloyd Songwriter, all the socials, Roku, Amazon, Apple TV, shameless plug. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. Well, my newfound status as a television personality and, dare I say, celebrity brought me to, of all places, Los Angeles. It was there in Los Angeles that I met a massively successful concert and party promoter. Ironically, his name escapes me entirely. Well, anyway, that concert promoter started to introduce me all over town and get me gigs and on concert bills with some of the greatest bands in the LA scene around 2011. It was at one of these gigs where I was doing a sound check one afternoon before the show when I noticed a mysterious figure in steampunk glasses, a top hat, and a cape lurking by the side of the stage. I didn't pay much attention to him and lost track of where he was standing, but somewhere halfway into my sound check, I look behind me, and he's playing drums to one of my better-known songs. He was totally in time and adding some real gusto to the song, so we just finished the song as if we'd been playing it our whole life. When the song was done, I took a long, hard look at his face behind the steampunk glasses, and it occurred to me that he looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. At about that moment, he removed the glasses and stared at me intently. Holy crap. It was him, my old friend from Steeltown. We both stood there silent and motionless. Then, after a few minutes, we gave each other a brotherly embrace, then walked outside to get high. Daniel suggested we light up in a '79 Firebird, so off we went. We spent the next 2 hours smoking and talking and reminiscing, and he filled in some, though not all, of the gaps from the many intervening years. When we ran out of weed and realized we had to go inside for the show, he says to me, "Hey man, so I'm sorry I just left that day, but I hope you found my note. And I hope it served you well all this time. What do you say we do it for real, man? Let's kick this world in the gut and start that band we always talked about back in Steeltown." I was so happy to have my friend back, and I immediately agreed. We decided that we were going to meet the next day at 3 p.m. at Mel's on Sunset and start laying the groundwork for the future. We were finally going to be as big as Pink Floyd and Thin Lizzy. The next day, as in years past, I put on my favorite Thin Lizzy T-shirt and I went down to Mel's for our meeting. I took a booth near the back and waited for Daniel. And I waited. After about 90 minutes, a waitress came over to me and said, "Are you Jimmy?" I told her I was, and she handed me a note. I opened it and it read, "Jimmy, I'm not going to be able to make it today, but go forth and become the person you are meant to be, and we will meet again under different skies when the spirit realm wants us to." It was signed Daniel from Steeltown. He did it again. He vanished, and all I had was another cryptic note and more questions. What could I do? So I went back to New York City and continued to build the Jimmy Lloyd Songwriter Showcase into pretty much the most awesome show about songwriters ever. I would always find myself at the best parties with the most beautiful women, designer drugs at my beck and call, and access to the most exclusive experiences North America had to offer. And it was great. But there was this thing that was always gnawing at me, this unexplainable unease. Was this truly who I was to be, or was this merely a way station on the side of the highway of my destiny? After another 7 years of living my best life in New York City, I woke up one morning in a cold sweat, with Steeltown on my mind. I packed a couple of sandwiches and hopped in my 1981 Firebird and hit the road. I was going back to Steeltown. I had to. I drove through the night, through the wind and the rain, and after 14 hours I saw the sign I had always remembered, and it was exactly how I recalled. It read, "Steeltown starts here." I was home. I can't describe all the emotions that engulfed me as I drove down Mountain Range Road, past our old middle school, and on to the North Steeltown Avenue. I wondered if the 7-Eleven was still there, and I hit the accelerator hard. I had to know. About a block before I got to the 7-Eleven, the skies opened up and colors from every spectrum of the rainbow shone down, seemingly coming right into my T-tops. It was clearly a sign. I pulled into the parking lot and was about to put my car in park when I got this notion to pull around back. I backed out of my spot and I drove around the corner of the building and parked. I put the car in park and I took the key out of the ignition. At just that moment, a blurry figure emerged from behind a stack of milk crates and slowly moved towards me. At first I thought it was an apparition, but as it got closer the figure became clear. It was him. It was Daniel. He returned to Steeltown also, to the site where all our dreams first began. He opened the passenger door and got in and looked at me and said, "Now we're ready, man. It's time for the world to know the keepers of Steel Town. I didn't say a word. I just knew. This time it would be different. This time it was gonna happen for real. We sat there in silence for about 10 minutes. Then without any warning, Daniel pulled out a Thin Lizzy cassette tape from his pocket and popped it in the Blau Planck and cranked the volume to 10. He lit up a joint, handed it to me, and we got high. The next day we recorded our first masterpiece and never looked back.